Trudeau's big firearms control announcement. So, never once to let a good tragedy go to waste, the Trudeau Liberals have chosen this week to drop legislation cracking down on law-abiding firearm owners. It's no coincidence that this legislation happens to be presented just after the horrific school massacre in Texas last week. Legislation like this takes time to draft and prepare. The Liberal firearm bill, it clearly has just been sitting ready and waiting for a terrible firearm incident to happen so they could take advantage of the public sentiment of the time. Now, if crime due to legally owned handguns in Canada really was an immediate and pressing problem, shouldn't the Liberals put this forward long ago? They had this legislation in the can, but they waited until it was politically expedient before going after handguns. The political future of the Trudeau government is a higher priority than public safety, and this proves it. Now, this proposed legislation is a solution seeking a problem. Shootings are indeed rising in urban areas across Canada, and citizens are rightly concerned about it. When we're looking at over 90% of the cases of handgun crimes in Canada, though, it involves an illegal handgun that's been smuggled in from the United States. In many of the other cases, the guns were stolen from somebody. Crimes committed by law-abiding, licensed, and registered handgun owners in Canada are statistically insignificant. Yet this is who the Trudeau government is targeting with this legislation. It's political virtue signaling on a grand scale, and it's not making anybody any safer. With legal registered handguns, the majority of fatalities they have caused, because there's some numbers in there, they like pointing to them, but those were suicides. If we want to try and reduce suicides, I'm all for it. Let's spend more money on mental health supports and treatment. Banning handguns won't do any better than banning ropes, though. If somebody really wants to do themselves in, unfortunately, they will find a way. Canada is drafting legislation in response to American culture wars that we aren't experiencing up here. We don't have a rash of mass or school shootings based on the easy acquisition of legal firearms. Most of our shootings are gang-related, and they almost never use legal firearms. And looking at the American efforts to quell gun violence through firearm restrictions, we can see a prime example of its failure in Chicago. Chicago implemented a gun ban and had some of the most restrictive firearm policies in the whole United States. The shootings in Chicago have only risen, with a shocking 3,561 of them in 2021. Unimaginable. More than, they were getting around 10 a day, and it contributed to 797 homicides. And this is where they've got the strongest firearm control legislation in the United States. Now, some apologists for Chicago's gun control failure lay the blame on the guns coming from neighboring states. Well, that demonstrates the futility of local controls. Most of Canada's illegal guns are coming from the USA, and our border is 8,900 kilometers long. Smugglers have been using drones to fly handguns over that border. How is banning legal handgun ownership going to stop this? Canada has nearly 1 million legally owned handguns, at least for now. We're actually one of the most highly armed civilian populations on Earth. Our handguns are highly regulated, and our culture is much different than our southern cousins when it comes to them. They just don't present a problem up here. During the announcement of the new regulations, Trudeau's lineup made the claim that this ban would make women safer. Again, legally owned handguns have not traditionally been a weapon of choice in the harm or murder of women. Indeed, a woman who owns a legal handgun is likely safer than many others. If we want to make women safer, we should be locking up our violent criminals. As I wrote recently, in less than a year in Alberta alone, 3 young women were murdered by repeat violent offenders. One of the offenders shot a 23-year-old Calgarian mother. He had a long criminal history, and hey, guess what? He was banned from possessing guns. It didn't stop him. Another mother of 5 was killed in a car accident as a gangster with no less than 6 attempted murders under his belt in Canada was chasing down a car and shooting at it. He had been banned from owning guns as well. It's almost as if the criminals don't care. The third one didn't use a gun to commit the horrific crime he did against a mother and child in Alberta, but he also had a long history of violent offenses. No gun laws would have prevented these murders. Keeping these known violent criminals in jail would have, though. And we had them, and we let them out, and they killed people. That's where we have a problem. Let's not pretend for a second that Trudeau is intent on stopping with just banning the legal sale of handguns. He's ideologically driven and desperate for a legacy he can claim after his lackluster term as a prime minister. Trudeau will move on to full-out handgun bans soon, and likely will turn his eyes towards long guns as well. The outcome isn't important to him, only the impression he hopes to make. If we want to fight violent crimes, it's going to take a complicated, difficult, and multifaceted approach. Unfortunately, we have a simplistic, one-dimensional prime minister who prefers surfing over heavy lifting. He would rather appear to be doing something than have to do all the work to actually accomplish something. If we want to save lives in Canada, we should be tackling the growing opioid addiction crisis. It's killing thousands of Canadians every year, far more than firearms are. And the illicit trade of the drugs is what's fueling the violent gang wars. Again, though, that's too too tough a nut for our current Prime Minister to try and crack. Gun smugglers and gangsters are smiling today as the Canadian government sets its sights on law-abiding citizens while barely touching the illegal gun trade. All this is going to do is make Canada a little less free and no safer.